Hi everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Simar, and I'll give you my intro, but I'll share my screen first. Cool. So I'll start off with quickly my introduction, and then jumping on to what will be the agenda for the session today. So my name is Simar. This is my picture climbing trees. So basically, I worked in working as a product manager, mostly in the consumer internet B2C space. I started off my journey with e-commerce startups like Lenskart, and then moved on towards payments. Um, so this was my journey, like for the last couple of companies. I was working at Paytm before I was working in my current company. So at Paytm, I was the product manager for the QR payments product. I'm sure that you would have gone to any retail store or any mall or a petrol pump, and you would have scanned a QR and then paid from your Paytm app. So there was a product I built at Lost at Paytm, huge scale, pretty interesting projects, huge, nice journey. And then from there, I had an option that whether I can work in Indian startups or Indian e-commerce companies, etc., or move to a bigger, more structured global organization like Microsoft or an Amazon. So I luckily cracked both. I got through Flipkart and Microsoft, but then life have other plans. So from Noida, I flew to Netherlands. So I shifted to Europe and I joined Booking.com. I'm not sure if everyone has heard of Booking.com. It's basically the global make my trip for the world. It's one of the biggest OTAs in the world, which is a competitor for Expedia,
It's
hotels.
everyone in cricket match, Simar. So don't worry.
Ah, really? Wow. Okay. So yes, I'm working in Booking.com in their headquarters in Amsterdam. So I'm based out of there. Um, yeah, that's been my professional journey so far. I started as an analytics guy, and then I moved to e-commerce startups, then Paytm, and then Booking.com. I had a choice to move to Bangalore or Hyderabad to join Microsoft or Flipkart, but then I chose to take a more global approach and then figure out what would be the experience for launching products at a global scale, and then working with peers who are from different countries and different geographies. Cool. Please feel free to interrupt me, ask me questions at any second, because I want to make it like a more interactive session rather than just spilling information on you and then we go at the end and ask questions. That doesn't sort of work. So please interrupt me as many times as you want, ask as many questions as you want during the session. Cool. So this was a quick introduction about me. So I think I'll focus on two aspects of product manager interviews today, because I've been a part of a lot of product manager interviews, giving and taking part both. Like I've been a part of the hiring committee, and then I've also interviewed for the companies I mentioned, like Booking.com, Paytm, Flipkart, Microsoft, etc. So one of the things which is almost there in all the product management interviews I've seen is that there are a case study round, and there are multiple formats of this case studies round, that whether it can be ad hoc, you go on into the interview round and you are given a case and they want to see your approach, how you solve it, etc., etc., or it can be a home assignment based. I've seen different approaches with different companies, but for sure there is one round for PMs which is deeply focused on case studies. So I'll zoom in a bit on that part. And what I'll do, I'll take like a real case study which was given to me in one of my interviews, and then I'll go on to the approach of how I solved it. So it will be more like a practical approach rather than more theoretical one where I can just give you the tips about be structured, be articulate, etc., etc. Because everyone knows that you have to be structured. So I'll give you a real life example on how I actually went about solving this case study, which was asked to me on booking.com. And then we can, as we move along, I can share you the tips that what I did, what should you do, what should be the framework, etc., etc. Make sense? Um, the second part, which I will sort of cover, is one of the most commonly asked interview questions in PM interviews is that tell me one of your past projects as a PM which you built, or a feature or a product or any past projects, and how you went about it. So if we have some time, I'll go into the second part of my session, and then I'll focus on that how you can actually, in your product management interviews, how you can structure and present one of the projects you did. And here also I will take one of the past projects, which I did as a PM, and then how I will portray it in an interview if I had the choice to do. Cool. If any questions, please ask me. Um, so I think just to begin, why people in a lot of PM interviews, why do they even ask business cases or case studies or product problems, etc.? Why do they even do that? The first thing which comes to the mind, that if the interviewer is asking something, there is an objective which he has in mind, and probably there are some skill sets which they want to evaluate in the interviewee. So, in my opinion, as I've been also a part of hiring PMs, there are three important aspects which we want to figure out whether these are the skill set as which a PM possess. One, there is no right or wrong answer in case studies. There is nothing black or white. It's not like you have to write a code and there's a program and you just run it and there's a either it runs or it gets failed. It's not like that. So what they want to do is that they want to figure out the approach on how you go about solving it, how structured you are, which direction you take, how you break down the problem, etc. Because this is one of the most important skill sets of a PM, and this will actually go a long way. And even it gets a part of a daily life routine as a PM as well. The next thing they want to figure out with case studies is that how articulate you are, because as a PM, you will work with a team, different stakeholders, etc., etc. There will be roadmaps, there will be vision, a lot of things like that. And when you communicate with a lot of stakeholders, your engineering team, your designers, people from different crafts, you should have amazing communication and articulation skills. And when you present and solve case studies and present your solution to the interviewer, then one of the skill sets which we are looking for is how you articulate your problem statement, how you break it down, and what's the solution you found. So articulation skills is one of the important things which we want to see when interviewers ask for case studies. The third thing, in my opinion, is that how you start with like a broad level approach, you structure the problem and define the blocks, and how deep you can go in each of the blocks to figure out um, how you can solve this problem and solve this case study. So deep dive is also one of the important things we want to figure out. Cool. Now what I'll do, I'll move on to an actual case which was asked to me when I was interviewing for booking.com. All right. So I will just read out the case which was given. This was like a PM home assignment. This was a part of, like, if you clear one or two initial rounds, then you're given this assignment. And when you go to for the face-to-face rounds in the headquarters in Amsterdam, then this is a 1 hour round in which you present the solution as a deck on the assignment or a business case you're done. Booking.com has this format, but there are other formats that other companies follow where it's not in the form of a home assignment. You go there and you can be thrown this question, for example, which I'm showing you there. So the question is that, suppose you are a product manager of payments at booking.com. What would you do to improve the authorization rate of your credit card payments and the user experience of the customers who choose to pay with the credit card? Okay. Does everyone understand the question? Please give a thumbs up. Do they understand what is the case study, what you want to do as a PM, what is the expectation? Okay, just give a thumbs up if, just give a shout out if everyone understands the question.
Yes, yes, got it.
Cool.
Yes.
So basically, what they want to do here is that they are giving one of the things or one of the projects or like a team to drive, and they want to see how you break down the problem, how you go about identifying what could be the problems, and how you define the roadmap, how you break it down into different epics, etc. So these are the things which these guys, and the focus will be both on the platform side, which is the back end, and on the front end side, which is the customer experience part. And but what they mean by authorization rate is that basically what is the success rate of the credit card payments. For example, if 100 customers choose to pay at this point at booking.com and the current success rate is 80%, that means 80% of the payments go through successfully and 20% fail. What would you do if you have to improve this metric of authorization rate? All right. So now I'll go deeper, given that we have understood the question, what's the case about, and what are the building blocks in our mind. I would say the first step is to deeply understand the problem and then make some kind of a mental blocks in your mind. All right. So the next part is that when you actually tell the interviewer or you have to present or structure the assignment, always start with a high level agenda. Don't go just deeper into one thing from the other, etc. So this agenda sort of thing makes like a mental map in front of the interviewer so that they understand that you are very well structured and you are actually structuring the problem or the solution you have to present. So what I did, I break it down into different things, and I thought that if I cover each topic with like a small detail, that would be good. So one, firstly to go deeper into how can we improve the credit card authorization rate. First, we need to understand and we need to explain that what is even credit card payments, how does it work. All right, so you need to go a bit deeper to explain that. The second thing is generally a part of what all the PMs do is that how do you understand and validate the pain points of the user. All right, so what would you do even to understand what problems exist with the credit card payments or the credit card authorization rate. And these problems can differ according to if it's booking.com versus make my trip versus Flipkart versus Amazon. So you need to actually first gather data in order to identify that what are even the problems, and after you have identified the problems, then you can figure out what will be the areas of improvement. And the areas of improvement I've sort of structured in user experience, which are the front end, etc. changes, and then platform improvements, because payments also work in like a very back-endish platform way. Now I've broken down the scope into two. What would be the quick wins? Like if I'm given a team and I'm a product manager, what would be my first 2 to 3 months plan, like 4 to 8 weeks plan on how I will go about it, execution at wise. Once I've identified that what could be the areas in which you can introduce, then would be sort of long term. How, if you're given a team as a PM, how would you manage like a 6 months plan? And next is basically what would be the targets and the objectives and key results and the projections. How do you go about that part? So what I did is that right after I was given a problem, I broke it down into these points. I did not go deep into any of them. Make sense? Now, once I've identified the sort of mind map and the sort of solution, I've figured out that this could be broken down into these things. Now, one by one, you go deeper into each and every point. Cool. So now I'll go deeper into each and every point, that how can you actually structure your case study. So this slide is basically an introduction on how credit card payments work. Given that I have been in this domain, I sort of knew about it. But if you're not, then probably for e-commerce PMs or for fintech or payments, this is a very basic and general thing which probably any e-commerce companies would expect that you would know. So if you don't know, then probably this is a good chance for you to learn something new on how payments actually work in the online world. I'll walk you through it very quickly and then we'll move to the next part. So there is a shopper, which is the customer which goes to the website or the platform of the merchant. And the merchant is basically the product or the application who is selling the product to the shopper. And that transaction can be for anything. It can be for an e-commerce good. It can be for a flight booking, taxi booking. In any case, you have to do some kind of an online payment. And then there are parties which you don't see, but these are at the background. and they are responsible for the money flow when you transact online. So there is a payment gateway, which is basically used to process the payment for that order. And then what happens is that there's something called the acquiring bank. So let's say there's a merchant called Flipkart. Flipkart at the back end will have their bank associated, and all the payments which are collected are credited into this bank, which is called acquiring bank. And acquiring bank is also known as the merchant bank, and it is used to accept payments on the behalf of merchant. Then there are card networks, which are Visa and MasterCard. And then there's the issuing bank, which has actually given you that card. For example, if you're a Yes Bank customer, then Yes Bank is the issuing bank. And then actually there's a merchant account. So when a transaction happens, then right when the customer pays to the merchant, the transaction goes from the merchant to payment gateway to acquiring bank to card network to issuing bank, and then finally to merchant transaction. What I've shown here is that there is something called a direct transaction and a on us transaction. I won't say that we have to go deeper into this, so let's skip that part. This is slightly more domain oriented, but on a high level, it's good to know that how does credit card payments work in the online world. So this,
Samarpal, I have a question.
yeah,
Uh, so the payment is getting collected in the merchant bank, but the payment gateway is also doing a direct transaction with the issuing bank, and then on top you've shown honest transactions. So shouldn't the arrow be the other side? Because even if it does a direct transaction from the issuing bank, that money will go to the merchant bank, right?
yes. So given that we are going deeper into this topic, it's nice to know the interest. Basically, there are acquiring banks, like I said, which are merchant banks, and then there are customer banks. All right. What happens is generally when you transact online, the acquiring banks and the customer banks are generally different 80% of the cases. For example, the acquiring bank is, say, ICICI, which is a merchant bank for, let's say, a merchant called Flipkart. But when you as a customer pay, and when you have a card account of Yes Bank, then basically this becomes like a different transaction, because the acquiring and issuing bank are different. So you have to go from the hop of one bank to card network to issuing bank. But in case when both the banks are same, that means the merchant bank was ICICI and the ICICI bank customer is also transacting. In that case, the transaction becomes honest transaction, which I've shown in the yellow arrow. Honest transaction is where the hop of card network is avoided and the transaction directly goes from the acquiring bank to the issuing bank because it's the same. Does it make sense? And in case when the payment gateway is also connected with the issuing bank, they have a partnership, then it's a direct transaction. The payment gateway directly talks to the issuing bank, and acquiring bank and card network are avoided altogether. So if I have to say that you have to optimize the success rate or authorization for each transaction, these are the steps involved. And the least the parties are, the better will be the success rate, because there are chances of failure at each point. So let's say there is a hypothetical flow in which you just debit the money from the issuing bank and directly credit to the merchant account, and there is no payment gateway, no acquiring bank, no card network. The success rate will be close to 100%, because there are less chances of failure. In online world, the transactions have a 80 to 85% success rate for credit cards, is because of the reason there are so many parties involved and there are chances of failure at each step. Right? So when we go deeper into this topic of optimizing the success rate of credit card payments, we also have to keep in mind that we have to do optimization at each step, because it's a complex flow. It's not a very simple flow which happens in online payments world. All right. Does it answer your question?
Uh, yeah, but I still have some questions. Maybe I can ask at the end,
Yeah.
or
Okay. Okay. So we'll just cover the presentation, and then the more questions we can take at the end of the presentation or offline. You can reach out to me, whatever works. Cool.
yeah.
Thank you. Um, so the next part, once we have set the ground and given the context on what the problem is, how does it work now, the next part which we have to go really deep into is that how do you understand and validate what are the pain points if you have to improve something called the authorization rate for credit card payments. All right. So how I thought that you can collect uh, data for transactions which are happening online is the first step is there is what I showed to you here is that this credit card payments process is like a funnel. All right. So the first step I would do as a PM that I will do like a funnel analysis, and what it would mean that at each step from acquirer, issuer, bank, etc., I would identify that what are the drops happening and what percentage, how many people are dropping here, how many people are dropping there, at which step, um, what are the possible reasons for the drop. Is the acquiring bank failing because of the timeout, or is the acquiring issuing bank failing because of low balance, etc., etc. So when you have this funnel, you would have a very nice idea of how it's actually working right now, and where have you have the opportunities of optimizing this whole funnel, because ultimately it's a funnel problem. You have to solve for the whole funnel. Make sense? So for understanding and validating pain points, the first step is that you should do a thorough funnel analysis. The next steps where you can collect more data for this process happening or this product is that you collect customer feedback directly. All right. So you can have various sources of collecting customer feedback, which can be from Play Store, App Store. You can send out surveys, you can talk to your customer support, and now analyze that data and then find patterns in the user's behavior. And they can be, for example, a lot of customers are saying that, hey, the transaction is not even redirecting to the issuer page. Then you would see some kind of a hint there. So these are additional channels of the collecting data and understanding even what are the pain points. Next, what happens is that there is something called as like a channel. For example, if a Flipkart is actually having online payments flow, they don't they don't actually rely on one payments provider. They actually integrate with multiple payments provider, and each one is called a channel. For example, they would rely on 10, and based on their performance, their capacity, they would sort of do like a routing to each of the payments provider, and they do routing basis on different parameters. So then the third point could be that we go to the payments provider and then do analysis there as well, that what is the response code, why are they failing, what is the capacity analysis, what is the trend of peak, how much load is coming. So this is slightly more platform or backendish kind of analysis. You analyze one funnel and customer feedback. This is like the analysis and data point collection from a customer standpoint. And then the second stuff which you do is generally how your systems are performing, how much capacity you can take as a tech PM. So I think this is also would be a very important data point to be collected when you're going deeper into understanding that what are the pain points which we want to solve for. Make sense? Anyone has questions? Cool. I'll move forward. So we'll go a bit deeper on what the payments funnel analysis would look like. So basically there is, like I said, there is a merchant. In this case, it's booking.com. There is a payments partner, which is called payment gateway, acquiring bank, a card network, and an issuing bank. And these numbers are basically approximate numbers. These are not actual numbers, because once you're presenting to someone a case, then you would assume some kind of rough numbers based on industry trends which are going on. But these are rough numbers, and you don't have to be accurate. Like I said, there is no right or wrong answer in terms of presenting business cases to in PM interviews. What they want to see is basically whether you are actually thinking about this stuff which I'm presenting. All right. So I'm giving these hypothetical numbers that the most drop happens at between merchant and the payments partner, and this is about 10 to 12%. And these drops can be about due to that the user is abandoning without even going to the payments page. The design is less intuitive. Customers are not having the option to pay via, say, American Express. They don't have choice for paying via other payment methods. There are redirection failures. The customers are not able to be redirected to the payments website. Um, so these are basically customer-facing failures. When we go deeper into banks layer, then it becomes sort of backendish failure. that can be say 3 to 4% and 6 to 8% in terms of card network and issuing bank. And that reasons could be that there is a connectivity error between all those parties involved. The capacity limit has breached. For example, one of the channels on which we were routing the transactions has actually exceeded the capacity, or maybe we are sending some incorrect parameters in the APIs. Or in terms of issuing bank, there can be a risk rejection, that the transaction is of too much high value and your issuer bank has rejected it. Or there can be insufficient funds in the card, or you entered the wrong details. I mean, these could be the reasons possibly which I could think of at that point. And then I sort of drew that this would be something how my funnel will look like. And I'll go deeper into collecting this data. Cool. So what could be the top reasons of payments failure? So if you have to optimize for success, you need to basically eliminate for all the failure reasons. Typically, industry trend is that successful payments are about 73 to 76% for credit cards. And the reasons are something like this. Like I said, these numbers are approximate, these are rough, these are not accurate. So don't rely on that. Rely on the framework I'm using, right? And then how deeper I'm going into each and every point. This is the learning to be picked from this case study. So what I presented is that once I've collected the data, I will present something like this, that, hey guys, these are the top reasons of failures which we have analyzed. Major reason is that a lot of people are dropping at the merchant payment page. 3 to 4% people drop at the bank page, they enter the incorrect OTP, the card has expired, the order has expired, the payment request is duplicate, the card details are incorrect, funds are not available, etc., etc. So once you make sort of this Gantt chart of what are the failure reasons, now you can look for the stuff on which you can optimize. So getting this data is really, really important to solve the problem. Make sense? Now, apart from once you have this, what could be the other data points you could look at? In my opinion, we can look at data points, and then what we can do is that we can divide it in three broad categories or themes. One is the theme around customer experience. One is the theme about growth. And the third theme is about the stability of the platform. In customer experience, you can look at things like what is the success rate trend, which is daily, monthly, and you can slice it by acquirer, bin, network, issuer. What is the drop at each step? How many customer queries are there? What are the number of retries? What is the load time of bank page? What is the CSAT score? What is the NPS? What is the customer's calls data, surveys data? In terms of platform stability, you can see what are the number of errors, what is the number of transactions which are pending, what is the hits on the major APIs, alerting and monitoring stats, what is the failure response codes from the acquiring bank. So what I did basically is that when someone asks you about data, what data would you look at? Should always categorize first that this is the data, and the broad theme in your mind should be customer experience, or it can be growth, or it can be retention. And then once you have a theme in mind, then go about deeper into what could be the metrics around it. For example, for platform stability, you can have things like errors, API success rate, etc. All right. So once you did this, you now have a comprehensive understanding on what the data is, how is it looking like, what would be the problems I can solve. Now you start thinking about solutions. All right. So this was the point where you were sort of strategizing and understanding what could be the problems. In your case study, always do a lot of focus on getting to understand the problems or getting to understand the pain points before you jump on the solution. If you jump on the solution right away, that's definitely not the correct approach which the interviewers are looking for. Now, the next thing which I covered as a part of my case study is that now you got the data, you understood the problems. Now you need to understand that what are the areas of improvement? How do you solve those pain points? In my mind, there are two broad themes if you have to solve this problem. One could be improvements in the user's payments experience, that how could you solve the user focused problem. In this, you can think of things like a retry experience, all right? Something like if your transaction has failed, you're giving an option to the customer to retry the payment. You're optimizing and reducing the friction by giving something called the auto OTP read and a submit. That the customer doesn't have to go to his SMS box and then remember the pin and enter. Instead, you can just auto read and submit. You're giving bank downtime errors. Even you know that these are the times when your bank is downtime and the transaction is expected to fail. You can auto display that error to the customer on the UI. You can have validations that how on the UI will look like in terms of different card schemes, different networks, etc., or different providers. And then you can think of something like a mobile optimized or network optimized form. Whether you're working on a mobile, then you have a different form which is loaded from the issuer bank in terms of interacting or entering the OTP. Or you have, if you detect that the customer has a slow network, then don't load images. You have a separate kind of form. So these were the things I could think of in terms of how you can improve the customer experience and solve the pain points which were linked in the previous slides. And then the second things which I thought that we could do, because payments is sort of a back-endish thing. It's a platform. Then apart from the customer experience, there are a lot of things which you can solve in the platform. For example, improve the routing logic, do a bin-based routing. That means instead of um, going randomly or round robin to different providers or different PSPs, payment service providers, what you would do is that you would understand that these are the bins and then write a logic on based on which you're routing the bins and integrate more channels. For example, if you see that you have 5 channels and your capacity is increasing, so you can have 10 channels or 15 channels based on your peak capacity. All right, you can do direct integrations with card networks so that there are less hops, which I was talking about in the beginning. So these are some things which you can do in the core payments platform or the backend side, and these are the things which you can solve in the customer experience side. So these are the broad themes which I thought in terms of what could be the epics or projects which you can think of in order to solve that problem, given you have a team. All right. Um, Now, the next question which comes that, okay, on a high level, you have these sort of ideas and how you can go about it. What they are interested in is that if you have a team and you're leading them, how do you structure these ideas and how would you present it in terms of vision and roadmap? All right. Also, one of the things which is important is that even if you have a lot of ideas, how would you measure the success of those ideas? All right, because if you have implemented it and you can't measure the success whether it worked or not, then it's sort of a time waste. So you need to present on that part that you can project ideas, you can drive them into roadmap, and also what you can do is that you can give a framework through which you can measure the success. So what I did is that I sort of divided my broad level ideas into 2 parts as the form of the solution to be solved, like a case study. Um, so I divided like these are some initiatives or some projects which are quick wins. So first, find the low hanging fruits in terms of you can show impact with the minimum effort, because when you talk about product building, there is always a cost involved. So divide it into quick wins versus long-term roadmap. So if you as a PM have been given this problem and you're given a team to solve that problem, then what would be your first 2 to 8 weeks plan? And what we are interested to know is that what would be your long-term vision for this team or for this product. So what I did is that in terms of finding low-hanging fruits, I actually went to the website of booking.com and I tried to do a test transaction. By the way, they actually charged me for that test transaction, and then they made a reservation and that never got canceled. It was a test transaction. But what I found out is that this is something like how the payments experience or the card experience was looking like on the website of booking.com. So when I saw this, that they are giving an option for the customer to select whether it's an American Express or Visa or MasterCard, I got to know that there is a problem, right? And how I got to know? Because I knew how typically payments form or credit card payments look like in other major online platforms. So one of the problems here which you guys can see, is that they're asking the user to select which card scheme is your card of, whether it's an Amex or Visa or MasterCard. And that's a problem because you can identify intelligently based on the card number. The first 6 digits of the card number is called BIN, which is called bank identification number. And intelligently these days from the BIN, you can already identify that what's your card scheme. So the problems which I saw with this current design or the current payments experience of booking.com at that time is that why do we have to input the card scheme from the user? And why aren't other card schemes like Maestro or Rupee, etc. there? And why are they calling it CVC code and why not CVV code? Because our customers understand CVV code better rather than CVC code. So does it even make sense to give them CVC because the user might get confused? Is the design less intuitive? Because for me, it looked like there's a problem with the design. And for the first time new user, there is no interactive tutorial. For example, I've seen very nice customer experience on some apps like Swiggy is that they actually give like a tutorial when the customer is making some kind of a first time transaction, and they give a small animation or a gif where it presents that, hey, if you have to find the CVV code, go at the back of your card and then see what CVV is, because you never know whether this customer is probably the customer who was never done an online transaction. For example, if my mother is making a transaction on this form, she would definitely go away. She can never make this transaction happen. So these are the things which I found like quick wins. You can solve this in like a week's time and understand whether your product behavior or your metric is moving. So instead of investing on like long-term 6 months, 1 year projects, which you definitely have to do in terms of long-term vision, but these can be the quick wins which you can do to solve that problem and for your product. Make sense? Please guys stop me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you have along the way. So these were the quick wins. Um, Now what I did is that when I got to know the quick wins, one thing which is really important when you're a PM is that you have to do some kind of a competitive benchmarking. What I did as a part of my case study, I went to other online OTAs platform like Expedia or Make My Trip, and I compared that what are their payments experience compared to what booking.com is offering. Now this gives an intuition to the interviewer that this guy is really serious. He's actually putting a lot of effort and actually working like as if I am the PM there, and then solving problems. So in terms of competitive benchmarking, what I did, I went to one of the competitors and then I saw their payments experience. All right. And then I presented that what are the difference here in this competitor compared to what booking.com is currently offering. Now you see that I entered first 6 digits here, and I can already see that there is something called a MasterCard which is appearing. That means that the initial experience of entering the card scheme from the customer is already a problem for the customer. You should never do that. And this is one of the ways in which you can communicate your vision that, hey, why is this idea valid? Why is this not your wishful thinking? This is a thought through idea. You can always say that if a competitor is doing it, this can be something you can always consider. So competitive benchmarking always helps. So you can see compared to the competitor, the positive signs here is that there is no input of the card scheme for the user. There is emphasis on secure transactions for user trust. So if you see that there is a green line in the front end that says we use secure transmission, we protect your personal information. This might seem like a small copy or a tag, but given I worked in e-commerce, this goes a long way. And these are the things through which online platforms, when they are processing transactions in terms of the scale of millions and thousands, they can actually communicate to the customers that we take your card payments security and privacy very seriously. Hence, we are actually displaying this message. So this is a very nice thing which I found in one of the competitors and compared that this is something which has never been explored in booking.com. So why not try this? And the third thing which I found positive in terms of competitor benchmarking is that there are more card schemes available, which are JCB, Amex, Diners Club, etc., which were not there in booking.com payments experience. So if you go to this competitor versus this, there are more chances of your success compared to what the current experience of booking.com is. Make sense? So what I did now is that now I have a fair understanding that what could be the quick wins, etc. What are the problems? I've got the data. I made like a roadmap of first, how do you say, 1 to 2 months plan, which could look like if you have given to solve this problem. So what I did is that I divided my roadmap into themes. And like I said, the themes can be enhancing customer experience, and then platform improvements, which are scalability, reliability, things like this. Now, what I did, I defined key metrics, initiatives, and then I divided into sprints. And then I said that for this theme, what I'll do is that I'll measure metrics like the success rate of card payments, the NPS score, the CSAT score, what are the customer related CS inbound, which is coming to um, for payments. And what I did is that I divided it into sprints. And the initiatives, which I listed on in the previous slides, which is, for example, funnel analysis and user research, I said I will do funnel analysis in sprint 1, take some projects, and then do funnel analysis again in sprint 3. And then I'll focus on UI fixes, which is like removing redundant input parameters, validations, design enhancements, optimizing the page load time. And then I said, okay, I'll try this some part in sprint 2, then analyze, then try some part in sprint 4. Initiatives like bank downtime notifications, enhancing the retry experience, auto OTP read and submit. So you don't have to go deeper into, how do you say, what are each of the projects, because I know it can be a bit too much for you. But what you have to understand is that this is a very nice way of structuring your vision and roadmap into actually actionable items. So you break it into themes, you define what are the key metrics, you define the initiatives, and then you actually give that how you're going to execute those initiatives with your team. And what it solves, that it gives sort of clarity to your stakeholders, which can be operations, business, leadership, etc., etc. But it also gives clarity to the team which is building this actually, which is the engineering team, design team, etc. And once you have this gives a lot of clarity to them. And then what I did secondary is that I divided this into the second theme, which is the platform improvements, and I actually defined the key metrics for them, which are platform uptime percentage, what is the peak load capacity, what is the success rate of the cards, channel performance, etc. And then here also I defined some initiatives and then divided them into sprints. That what are the response code correct mapping, whether we can do direct integrations as a project or not, whether we can optimize the status query frequency and the expiry time. Make sense? So what I did is basically jot down, break down, define the initiatives, and actually break down it into sprints. So this become like a nice 2 months or 1 quarter kind of roadmap for the team when you're actually starting up as a PM. There are a few quick slides because, like I said, um, ideas are nice, but till the time you don't are able to measure their success, then it's a problem. So as a PM, you also need to present and demonstrate that if you have some ideas in mind, how will you go about launching it, and how will you actually measure the success of those ideas? So what I said, that to measure the success of the ideas which I presented in the previous slides, I will use a framework which is called A/B experiments, right? So what I'll do is that I research my user behavior and activity, which I did, find the improvement areas, which are your hypothesis. Then you develop your hypothesis for those ideas that will fix the gaps. Like I said, for basically the payments experience, we will not let the user select the card scheme, and we will auto identify it. So this is your hypothesis. Then you would A/B test your ideas. For example, you can have the current version, you can optimize for this idea, make a new version, and then measure that what's the difference coming in. And then you will, once you have tested the ideas and you have the results, then you would deploy the winners and then measure and set goals again. So this is an iterative loop which keeps on going and keeps on optimizing your product and the customer experience. So by this, what I did, that I gave the idea to the interviewer that not only I'm good in terms of executing defining the roadmaps or defining the problems. I'm also good at understanding that I'm data driven. That's one. And also is that measuring the success is really important, and we actually as PMs should follow frameworks for measuring the success. Now let's take an example. And how would you actually go about designing an A/B experiment? So let's say take the one of the projects which I wanted to go deeper into. So let's say there is the project which we wanted to go, that the hypothesis is that once you remove the card type selection input while making a card payment, that will decrease the user drops and actually increase the authorization rate of card payments. So now your new form will look something like this, which is on the right side. So now you don't have a card type field. You just have card number, expiry date, and CVC code, which is pretty standard. So you need to have a goal of the experiment, which is that authorization rate will increase by 40 bips by removing card type as an input field. And then you have metrics to track, which is, let's say, which are the secondary metric, which are percentage of drops and the payment gateway, transaction value, breakup of payments by card scheme, because you also want to measure that maybe one of the key metrics is being positively impacted, but other key metrics will be negatively impacted. And then you have something called a sample size calculation. And I've used like a simple tool for doing this, that your baseline conversion rate, I assume that it's 76, and I said that it will increase by 40 bips. So based on the statistical significance, you will have like a 400,000 sample size for this experiment. So this actually showed that not only I can define the roadmaps, if I have to go deeper into one of the projects, I can do that. So this was the thing for that. Now then, when we have talked deeper about customer experience part, now I think one of the key things to demonstrate that not only the front end is the strength of this PM, you can also think about the back end scalability and the platform side of solving problems, because this is one of the important aspects which interviews look for, um, that the PM is equally well versed with the customer experience things and also more technical backend or platform related stuff. So what I did is that I made a hypothesis, is that which is, one sec, there is some, yeah. So problem statement that when the peak load goes higher and you have a unlimited number of channels, then your success rate goes down and the latency creeps, right? So this is one of the graphs I found online, which shows that if you have to make a scale platform, you need to have more channels when your capacity goes up, and you need to do a better routing in order when you want to transfer the transaction to, or route the transaction to the relevant channels. So in order to build the scalable platform, one of the solutions could be that each of the preferred payment service provider channels, you can have like a capacity filter. That means when the capacity for one of the channel goes above the threshold, then you transfer the next transaction. So in this way, you can actually do a better and more intelligent routing in terms of transferring the transaction to the different service providers or the different banks which work at the back end. So this shows as an example that if the bank A has a capacity of 300, bank B has a capacity of 300, and bank C has a capacity of 300. So initially, what will happen is that bank A filtered out from all the available channels when its capacity is maxed out, and then you give capacity to bank B and bank C, and then you give the next transaction. So if 540 transaction come, you will actually give the bank A is maxed out, so you don't give any more transaction K, because if more transactions go on to bank A, your transaction will actually start failing. So the ideas in which you can build like a more scalable platforms in terms of routing the transactions is that you can set thresholds for the limits in which this bank or this channel can take the number of transactions. This is like a threshold. Once it's breached, you don't forward any transaction to that channel. And then you figure out intelligently that which channels are basically available for taking the transactions in terms of the capacity, and then you forward those transactions to those available channels based on the performance. Something called a load balancer kind of technique. If some of you is an engineer, they would understand that what about. So in order to solve platform problems in terms of peaking and load capacity, these are scalable solutions you have. So now what I did is that once I've solved for quick wins, now when you have a PM, you also need to try the long-term vision and the long-term themes. So what I did is that I took this and divided into Q1 and Q2. So let's say you're given this project for 2 quarters. So I divided it into, and I said that this will be my focus area for 2 quarters if I'm given this project. One, I have to optimize it for the success rate. Second, enhance the customer experience. Third, build a reliable and scalable platform. And four, make sure that the things grow. So this actually shows that you're actually working in more like a objects and key results approach. So these are the broad high level vision statement and object for your team or for your product or for your project. Does it make sense? So all work in terms of objectives when you're presenting case studies. So what the long-term roadmap? So what I've done is the same. I've divided it into themes, key metric initiatives, and now instead of sprints, I've divided it into month one, month two, month three, month and six. So I divided it into months, and the themes are the same: customer experience, platform improvements, and the third theme I've added this time is growth, because when you think of long term, instead of solving for the quick wins, growth is also something which is really relevant for a PM. They also need to demonstrate that they're actually growing their product. These are some of the long-term initiatives which I've listed in each theme. For example, machine learning based routing, or integration with the top 80% acquirers, or something called like a partner integrations, or a referral program, or a loyalty program, or aggregation with the for gateway aggregators, or direct integrations. So these are some of the initiatives which I researched, and I took I divided it into these initiatives and presented like a long-term roadmap, which gives a really good idea to the interviewer that this thinking as a PM is structured and not only about short-term wins but also the long-term roadmap for the team. Now, what I did was that instead of also after defining that what could be the roadmap for the team, etc., now there should be something at the back mind of a PM that after planning for like regular tasks, projects, the priorities of the business, you also need to think of some moonshots project which can really boost your project, can give you that competitive edge over the competitors. So what I did, I also defined some moonshots for Q1 and Q2. So I said they'll also work on moonshots instead of also apart from the roadmap. So I'll try to set up like a mandate to skip the two-factor authentication with the permission of the regulators and the banks. I will try to make sure that the credit cards are sort of have a standing instructions to make like a wallet for booking.com. I will make machine learning models. I will make like an aggregator for payment gateway aggregators so that you can actually aggregate on the top of payment gateway and build like a smart routing layer. And I will also think of something called a magic retry feature. So these can be some of the moonshots ideas I can think of. You don't need to go deeper into each and every project which I've or the idea or initiative. What you need to pick up from here is that apart from structuring for the regular projects, as a PM, you should also present something like a wow factor, which is like a moonshots project, which you're planning in terms of the regular roadmap. Now, what I did is that once you have a team, you've solved you actually identify data, you have a roadmap. How will you measure your team or your project or your product is going in the right direction? And that can be done by measuring it. All right. So what I did, and then I made some projections slide. Projection slide is looking something like this. And I've divided it into objectives and key results. The objectives for me would be, say, monthly card transactions on the platform are greater than 50. It's a random number. And the next objective is that the best payments customer experience along all the OTAs. Now, once you have these objectives, which are defined more on a high level, how would you see the key results? Because objectives can never be measured. You can always measure key results from the objectives. All right. So the key results would be that the card payment success rate is 85%. Okay, fine. And what are the targets? The current number is 70%. Let's say I'm defining a target for my product in Q1 and Q2. So that shows By Q1, the team has to work for projects, which actually makes this the KPI from 78 to 82, which also looks realistic once you define the projects. And the Q2 target 85. The transacting monthly active users will be greater than 50 million. Okay, and it is 30 million. The Q1 target is 42 million, and the Q2 target is 50 million. So this is something which present as a PM, and which also helps in understanding the interviewer that you're very strictly data driven. You think in terms of measuring the success rate, etc. So I've defined key results, and then the current number, Q1 target and Q2 target. It's also for NPS score, NC set score, etc., etc. All right. Okay. Um, Once you have done this, I think pretty much you have covered all the aspects we to cover in the beginning, right? From understanding the ideas, understanding the framework for collecting the idea, gathering the data, understanding the areas of improvement, doing some sort of competitive benchmarking, and then we went deeper into how do you present your roadmap into short term versus long term, how you divide into teams, and then you actually how you go about setting up the key metrics and the results, and sort of the success for the team. Makes sense. So this was a brief about how you're given case studies in PM interviews question and how you approach it. Um, so you have to be articulate. We want to find that whether you are structuring the problem in the right way, structuring the solution in the right way, whether you can go into some aspect, and whether you can actually drive the team's vision, set the roadmap, etc., etc. So this, for example, is a very nice way to understand that how a PM approaches their skill set. So I'm happy to take questions if you have.
Simar, I have some questions.
Sure.
Was in the projections and OKR slide which you showed, were your OKRs based on your roadmap objectives, or I mean, what are these objectives? Are your roadmap goals, right?
Can you please ask the question again?
Yeah. So basically in the OKRs and projection slide, you've given some OKRs.
Yeah.
So they are for some objectives. So how did you get these objectives? Are these objectives from the roadmap what you had planned? That this and this
No.
is what you're planning to do, and these will be the OKRs for those goals.
So actually, your objectives are defined by what you think is the vision for your product. All right. So, and that vision can change at the time in which your product is. For example, if you're a new startup, your vision could be that you have to hire the right people. So that can be your objective, and the key result could be that you actually hired the people. So this is your key result. For the product or the problem which I was given, that you have to improve the authorization rate, I thought that the objectives could be: one, you have to grow the transactions. That means you want more and more transactions. And second is you want the best experience. So this I thought of could be the objectives. And objectives sometimes when it's a top-down company, it's defined by the leadership. But generally, most of the companies I've worked in, as a product manager, you have to set objectives for the product and the team. All right. So once you have set the objectives, then you can obviously brainstorm and actually align on what could be the key results on you which you would measure the objectives. But objectives come from the PM itself, and objectives should be very closely linked with what's the vision of your product.
Okay, and then these objectives are broken down into the sprints for your roadmap. Like one of the objective is customer experience among all
Yeah,
OTAs, uh, and I guess in the previous slides you had shown that the one of the quick wins would be to enhance user experience.
yeah,
So so those things which you had shown in the previous slide fall under these two objectives ka umbrella, right?
exactly, correct. So everything, all the projects or all the themes or the roadmap items should sort of fall under these one of these objectives, which is a, you improve on the user experience, or you build a scalable platform and grow, right? And the growth is that the monthly transactions increase. So both should sort of, each project should tie up into your objectives which you're doing for your product.
Okay, so you break your problem statement into the objectives. Then you break the objectives into the short, quick wins. Which objective are quick wins, and then you break them down into the roadmap. And whichever objective is a little time taking or something, you put them into the long term roadmap. Is that the approach?
Exactly. Yes, you have articulated it absolutely correct.
Okay, okay, thank you. Because I was also trying to make a roadmap, so I wanted some clarity, like how what's the way
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah.
Hi,
Happy to
Simar.
answer.
This
Yes,
is this is Avaz.
hi
Uh,
Abbas.
Simar, I just wanted to know, like, you have decided here KRs and timeline and success rate and all the things you have articulated it in a very good manner. But I just wanted
Mhm.
to know, like, whether this has been provided by the company itself, or you have made an assumption about these things.
Do you mean this slide, this one?
Yes, this one and success rate.
All right.
Uh,
So the way estimation and roadmaps work and should work is that you should always do it as a team activity, because as a product manager, even if you give those numbers and your team doesn't agree with it, it's useless. So this is always a team activity. But given that you are given this as a case study, and then they want to assess that whether you can solve this as a PM. So this is sort of a dummy numbers. So
okay.
don't actually go on this thing. But what I wanted to present is that as a PM you can make a roadmap, which is really
Yes.
important, and how you structure your roadmap. But when you're actually doing your daily job as a product manager, this is never a single person's activity. This is a team's activity.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's what like I was thinking, like whether
Yeah.
this has been. Thank you.
Uh, Simapal, Sarde here. I just want to ask, was this given as a part of on-spot case study, or did they give you time to do it?
Yeah. So this one was given to me as like a home task. So I
Okay.
was given like a week's time to solve that problem. The only thing which they gave to me was this. Wait, this was the only one slide which was given to me after clearing like a couple of initial rounds at booking.com. And the next round, which I when I went to Amsterdam, and then I had my face-to-face round. So one round was a dedicated 1 hour round, and there were two product managers which were senior sort of group PMs and director level, which were discussing about the problem statement. But I have seen this process in different companies. Some prefer giving you like a home task or home assignment for case studies, but some can give you on the spot itself. So when I went to interview for Microsoft gave me a problem statement that, let's say you are a product manager at Google for Play Store, and then Google has different products like Calendar, Google has Gmail, Google has, let's say, what has Google Search. Now, what you have to do is that you have to collect feedback from Play Store and make like a feedback analysis or insights tool for these different product managers. You have to become like a B2B product manager. So this was given to me on the spot, and I had like 5 minutes to think of this problem and then come up with a solution. But then different companies take different approaches. But the short story long, whenever you go for a PM interview, most probably if it's a well-known structured company, they will definitely ask you in one of the rounds about case studies for sure.
Yeah. So if it was given as an on-spot a question or like case study, what parts of the framework that I should be mainly focusing on? Because
Correct.
the road mapping and the OKRs part need a bit more time for an
True.
on-spot question, right? So which areas do I need to focus or stress more in an on-spot case study round?
Yeah, I think it's a very very nice question, because I think when you are given some time to prepare versus you're given like a on-spot question in which you don't have hours to think on and ponder on. I think for on-spot, let's go to this one. So let's say here the framework or the approach is that set the context, understand the problems, areas of improvement, quick wins, and roadmap and projections. So I would say you can skip the part of how would you go. You don't have to go a bit deeper into, let's say, the part of measuring the success, because when I presented this, I went a bit deeper into A/B experimentation, how would you set the hypothesis, etc., etc. The part which you cannot avoid at all, even if it's an on-spot round, is that you have to identify that how would you figure out the pain points. You have to go through that part for sure, that you have to give some sort of a detailed analysis, or your how do you say, project plan, or some kind of a plan, that how do you understand that these are the problems which are existing. And then once you have given a nice idea of what are the problems that exist, then you can go a bit deeper into finding like some solutions for it. And after you've thought about some 3 or 4 solutions, then you can go about prioritizing that into roadmap, quick wins, long wins, etc. And then you can end there. You don't go like, you can't go this deep into when you're presenting something, because I can give you an example that when I was in interviewing for Microsoft, they gave me this example of building a feedback analysis tool. So I started with something like, what could be the problem, how, like, what do they want to see, where do they want to see the ratings, or comments, or a Gantt chart, etc. What should be the frequency. So one of the part of case studies is that you have to keep interacting. You can take some assumptions, but keep interacting with the interviewer and ask questions, like I did. That what could be the frequency at which you want to see the data, which could be the apps, etc., etc. And then you can go a bit deeper into, hey, so this is how I will build the product. I will store the data, and then on the daily basis, I will schedule a cron job which pushes the data, and then make some kind of a sort of a system architecture, make a dashboard. How will the dashboard look like? How will you store the data? And then it depends on the interviewer that where they want to go with this problem, whether they want to go more into the tech side, go more into the user experience side, etc., etc. But you can start off something like this, which I described. So as a framework for case studies in on-spot rounds, definitely go with pain points, go with the solutions which you think, and then roadmap. Please don't skip these 3 steps.
Sure. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, guys, you have anything else which you want to ask? I'm very happy to answer your questions.
I just had a question on the credit card payments flow.
Yeah,
I just wanted to understand that flow.
yeah,
The payment gateway is a vendor, okay, and the payment gateway is directing the payment. So I'm the customer. I'm paying to Flipkart. I have an account in Axis Bank,
yeah,
and Flipkart is has a merchant bank of ICICI. So that acquiring bank is ICICI. So if I directly pay to Flipkart, it will go into the ICICI bank, the normal flow.
yes,
And then once it goes to the ICICI bank, it hits the card network, that is my card network,
yeah,
and it goes
which
to
can
my bank.
be Mastercard or Visa, etc. Because the thing, you first have to understand that why are the card networks existing. Because when the transaction goes to an acquiring bank, which is ICICI doesn't know that whether your card is let's say a Yes Bank, and they can't directly reach to Yes Bank, because banks doesn't have a card network on their own. What Visa and Mastercard did is they did some kind of a unification among different banks which are existing in India or in the world. Now, when you see move out of card payments and go to something like a net banking or UPI, then there is nothing existing like a card network. In that case, there is something called NPCI, which is sort of doing the unification instead of card networks. So the government took more control and then unified this payments experience and connected different banks.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, and then it is going to the merchant's account, which is basically in the acquiring bank, right? Or it can be in another bank.
No, it's in the acquiring bank.
Okay, so basically it's coming back to the acquiring bank.
Yeah, what I mean by coming back is that when you do a transaction, the funds get debited from your issuing bank which is basically your bank, which has issued you a card.
Hmm.
And then at the next day, what these PSPs do is that PSPs gives the money to the merchant account. For example, ICICI was Flipkart's account, and let's say the vendor was PayU, which was the payment gateway. So PayU, whatever money they have collected from the customer, they will pay to the merchant's account, which is ICICI in that case. And then Flipkart will collect the money from them. They will have a settlement process, payout process, etc. It's very complicated, but
Got it.
generally this is how the flow works.
And then when does honest transaction work? That is, when don't you need the card network basically?
When acquiring and issuing bank have a partnership. For example, in some cases, ICICI and Yes Bank have a special partnership, and when the transaction comes on the acquiring bank, which is ICICI knows that I can skip the card network and go directly to the issuing bank. In this case, is of honest transaction.
Okay, but how will ICICI know that it's coming from Yes Bank, even if it has a partnership, unless it
Be-
checks it,
because
unless it
they
goes through the card network, or it? I mean, how will it know that the payment is being made from Yes Bank unless it checks the card details, right?
the card details will always go from the payment gateway to acquiring bank. And
Okay,
let's say the acquiring bank is ICICI, and acquiring bank has partnership with 5 banks, right?
okay,
Which is Yes Bank, Kotak, etc., etc. So for these 5 banks, they will directly talk to the issuing bank. But for the rest of the banks, they will go via card networks, because simply they cannot talk to them directly because they don't have a network. So they will have to include Mastercard or Visa or MX there.
okay, okay. And when do you prefer a direct transaction? Like, why do you need a acquiring bank and a card network? Why can't you always have a direct transaction?
This is the this is the reason for existence of card networks, right? Because let's say all the banks had partnership with each other in an ideal world, where Yes Bank knows that if it's ICICI transaction, I'll talk to the ICICI directly. Um, when it's a Kotak transaction, I will talk to Kotak Bank directly. Then there was no need of a card network. Then all the transactions would have flown directly from one bank to the other bank. But in the legacy reasons, when the payments world was being set up in online industry, this did not happen. And card networks like Mastercard, Visa, they actually did the problem solving of unifying all the banks. And then what they do is that they take their commission for each transaction which is happening. So they make a lot of money, because all the transactions pretty much which is happening online and offline is happening through the card networks. This is why they exist, and this is why we need them.
So we are paying. So the merchant is basically paying at the payment gateway also and the card network also, right? So
The
both.
merchants the merchants pay to payment gateway their commission, which is like depending on the card, etc. It varies from
2%
one
or
to
3%, something like that.
it varies from 1 to 3%, and then a part of that goes to Mastercard and other card networks.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
got it. Thank you.
no worries.
Thanks so much, Simar. It was a great session, and I'm sure it would have helped everyone. And thanks a lot for putting in so much of effort and your patience. It's already 10:35.
No, no,
Thanks a
it's
bunch.
completely okay.
I
Have a very nice evening, and then I hope you had some learnings from the session you had. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any sort of questions, and I'm happy to walk you through if you have any questions related to guidance in terms of PM interviews, career path, etc., e-commerce, payments, etc. It was